Harvey Norman also received a first strike against its remuneration report at today's AGM. We mentioned this story earlier. Gerry Harvey's critics certainly firing up, but he certainly met them with his own criticism. Joining us now is John Winning, CEO of Winning Group, and Tristan White, founder of CEO of the Physio Co. Both here for taking stock. Thank you, Tristan, and also John tonight. Yeah, first strike, we've seen it with a lot of companies lately. Tristan, I guess it's a difficult time for retailers. John, we can talk to you a little bit about that. For shareholders, certainly. What do you think about the story today?
Oh, look, to be honest with you, Brooke, I reckon it's somewhat predictable, to be honest with you. And what I mean by that, it's a tough market. Harvey Norman shares are down significantly since February of this year. The shareholders are not enjoying life at the moment, and at the same time, remuneration seems to be suggested to be improved. That seems like a pretty predictable response from my perspective. But you know what? I reckon it's really important that leaders have empathy for their shareholders. At the same time, shareholders have empathy for the managers and boards that are doing the very best they can to lead these businesses in a tough time out there, is my thoughts.
Yeah, how tough, John?
Yeah, well, for us, obviously, I think we're doing reasonably well, but retail is certainly tough around us, and we notice, you know, it's tricky on margins. We're lucky enough to be able to obviously experience growth, which is getting us through. But you always have to balance that as a business leader, balance your shareholders and balance your team. And you always want to look after your team and try and retain your good people, which means that, you know, maybe even at your executive level, as the Harveys once might have been, you want to hold on to your good people and keep them motivated, but at the same time, you do have shareholders that you have to look after. I'm obviously lucky enough in a family business, less shareholders to worry about. However, I think it would be
AGMs to front
it's a tough balance.
Way,
The share's been down something like 25% in a year to date, Tristan. I mean, can you have shareholders that frustrated, that sort of let down, without them kind of lashing out at you and saying, no, you're paid way too much, this has all got to stop? Is there any way around that, do you think?
The only way around it, I reckon, is wonderful, wonderful communication that lets people know as to why there's this proposed remuneration. And I expect that the Harvey Norman board have done their very best at that, but it certainly hasn't worked yet. And I think that's the opportunity for us, all of our leaders, is to figure out how is it that we can communicate the tough times, what we plan to deal with it, and how we can go forward.
Communication, absolutely. I thought it was really interesting as well that, you know, the board hasn't actually changed since 2007. So this idea that this is a first strike, a second strike will mean that there'll be a board spill. Some people are going, you know, let's bring some fresh blood in. You know, this has been a very difficult industry. This is 11 years with the same board. John, what do you think?
I reckon we don't value stability enough in this country, and when it comes to, you know, our leadership, we just turf everyone the second something goes even slightly wrong. I think that's becoming a big problem.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there, but I think, you know, when you get a board that might be stale or not turning over, then you get a business model that equally sticks true to what it knows. And the business had performed very, very well over the last multiple decades, probably 3 decades. It's probably a star on the ASX. However, when times change and business models need to get shaken up, if you've got people that have been there for a decade, or some of them probably even 2 decades, and they don't know any better than what served them true for that period of time, then they're not that interested in trying something new. And I think, you know, you're seeing that in the business model. No change in the board, no change in the business model.
I did see Gerry Harvey's comments from 10 years ago put up again in bright lights this week, that the internet shopping idea was a con. I think he said 10 years ago, and 4 years later started the website, etc. So yeah, I mean, he's had to come a long way. Elon Musk is certainly shaking things up when it comes to business leadership. There was this really, I think what some people have described as a bizarre revelation from Elon Musk, that Tesla was in the single-digit weeks away from death during the Model 3 production. Okay, extra transparency. We're always wanting extra transparency. Okay, so we got it, but then we call it bizarre. What do you think's going on here? Who benefits, John?
For me, I think that it's just a sign of Elon Musk doesn't really care. You know, I think he's just got his blinkers on. He knows exactly what they need to achieve at Tesla, and it shows to me probably the opposite of instability, but more just someone who knows exactly what they want to achieve and doesn't think that it will actually matter if he's smoking a joint with Joe Rogan on some podcast, or whether he's saying that we almost went broke as a company and we only had single-digit weeks to survive. He just knows what he needs to do. He's going on to try and achieve it, and I think if you're going to disrupt an industry that big and you're going to be that entrepreneurial and you're going to go from zero to such a large valuation of a company and produce so many cars and have that many employees in such a short space of time, you're only getting there by being entrepreneurial and taking risks. And I think that he's so adverse to taking risks that he doesn't mind taking risks so much and so open to taking risks that something like this just doesn't even faze him.
Yeah, and you guys have both done it, of course.
Absolutely. I was fascinated to see this and hear about this because, you know, I'm an employee. I want to know how often do bosses just pretend everything's okay when they're only weeks away from catastrophe? Tristan?
Well, this is a pretty big, what Elon's told us is a pretty big situation. But the reality is that as a leader, you have to choose what is the right piece of information to give to each person at the right time. And Elon has chosen it. And his approach is very entrepreneurial, like John said, and it's very focused, or very, my experience, what a private company may operate. The difference is Elon runs a publicly listed company, and then he's, in my experience, he's doing it in an entrepreneurial way, which is making stuff happen without necessarily revealing all the facts. And I think that as a leader, like, for example, how do I deal with stuff like that? Because it has happened, really short on cash in a small, growing, fast growth business. Growth sucks cash. There's no question about it. It sucks it quicker than any of us ever realised. But if you, as an employee, if you realise that we're running out of cash, would you be quickly looking for another job? Maybe. And that is the risk that we take as leaders, is making sure that we've got stability, but also we are paddling like crazy.
Like ducks with the feet paddling under the water.
Exactly. That's right.
One other thing about Australian schools and whether they're failing us on basic Aussie knowledge. We quite like this one. This was Alan Jones basically out saying, we don't know the answers to some basic questions about Australia that we absolutely need to know. We'll throw some up on screen for you. I don't think Chris and I have to reveal how many we didn't know, but we didn't score high.
I was a little bit embarrassed. I was.
So we'll show you some of the questions that we're told we really should be knowing the answers to if our education system was okay.
That's right. So how did Sydney, Melbourne, how did they get their name? What river is Mackay on? What is the Great Australian Bight? All these sorts of questions that, I don't know, Alan Jones, what's he, like, to me, that just says to me that he's really happy with how he's doing at pub trivia right now. I mean,
Chris is like, that's just trivia
questions. That's just trivia, right? That's geography and that's history. I mean, John, are you worried about kids coming out of school not knowing the answer to this?
Yeah, I think they should have some basic fundamentals, and I'm actually reasonable friends with Alan Jones, and he once told me recently, because I had told him, look, I don't really listen to the radio, certainly talk back, and I don't read the newspaper too often. I'm so focused on my own business. And he said to me, if you're not interested, you're not interesting. And I thought, wow, okay, that took me back in my seat. And ever since, he's recommended a few newspapers that I should read on a daily basis and articles. And I've tried to stay more up to date with what's going on in the world. And I guess this is more what's going on in our backyard and just the fundamentals of history. I think that this should be taught in schools, but I think if this was taught to me when I was at school, that it would be in one ear and out the other. I think what's important is understanding why this is important, why this knowledge, you know, will help you later in life, or just understanding the absolute basics about, you know, where our country was founded, and certainly the western part of the history, along with the more traditional history and the Indigenous history. Yeah,
and that was one of his arguments. We learn more about Indigenous history than Western civilization.
I think there's got to be a balance of both, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Unless, you know, and one kid's saying, I've been learning about whether Donald Trump's going to blow up North Korea. Like, great, but also let's focus on what's kind of in our own, you know, direct backyard as well. Tristan?
Oh, look, I reckon there really is a place for history. It's a long time since I was at school, and I wasn't a great history student at the time. But you know what? I reckon storytelling and learning about the past helps us to prepare for the future, because in business it's so cyclical. There's cycles that come around, and it's the same in life. And I reckon learning about history helps us prepare for the future. And I don't know, call me crazy, but as a parent, I reckon our job is to help our kids and the kids of the future to be better versions of who we are, and so they can contribute to the future. And I don't think they can do that if we don't help them to understand history in the past. Yeah,
look, it's a fair point, but I mean, I'm still a little confused that Alan Jones is saying that of all the things that need to be taught in schools, that he's worried about history. I thought history was rusted on when it comes to school curriculum, but I mean, we know.
I don't think it gets taken in though, so I think I learnt history. You get to get out of it at a reasonably young age.
That's it.
And then at the age that they are teaching it, you're not learning unless you're really interested in what's going on. Yeah. Some kids obviously are smart and they want to get the top of the class, so they'll learn it because they want the good marks. But if you're a student like me that didn't really care about marks, you just didn't take it in.
Tristan, as a parent, are your kids being, just on a kind of related topic, are your kids being taught about money in schools? Any kind of financial literacy? Because ASIC's really talking about how the literacy issues becoming emotional, and people are becoming stressed about money, and really it all starts in schools. Are you seeing anything?
Yeah, so this is important, and so I'm not seeing a huge amount of it. I've got little kids, so we're only just getting started at school.
Okay.
But to be honest with you, I've got no doubt that the basics of money management and a practical more money in than money out, that's the sort of basic practical stuff that I reckon needs to be taught in schools, because entrepreneurship is a skill that more and more people are choosing as a career, and we can't not teach the basics of money management to be able to build entrepreneurs of the future.
Yep.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, I think there's a few fundamentals that should be taught about money. One, it doesn't equal happiness, first and foremost. Yeah. Secondly, you should learn how to earn it. And then thirdly, you should learn how to save it, and learning probably the risk of taking on a lot of debt. I think there's much of the world that we live in today that's all about more debt, afterpay, credit cards, home loans, banks, and people get themselves into such a tricky point where they can't get themselves out. And I think that, you know, if you teach those 4 fundamentals, I think someone will be pretty well set up for the rest of their life.
John, thank you so much from the Winning Group, and Tristan, the Physio Co. Thank you very much for joining us, for taking stock tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.